All right, just a note, Monday, 12:30, being the first Monday of the month, there will be a briefing by Ambassador Fu Cong, permanent representative of the People's Republic of China and president of the Security Council for the month of February. The briefing will be in person only. So if you want to ask questions, come on down. 12:30, sir. Just a few more additions to the situation in the DRC, but more focused on humanitarian human rights. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that humanitarian organizations in Goma continue to assess the impact of the crisis, including the widespread looting of warehouses we've been talking about, and the offices of aid organizations as well. The World Health Organization and its partners conducted an assessment with the government that's between the 26th and yesterday, and report that 700 people have been killed and 2,800 people injured that are receiving treatment in health facilities. These numbers are expected to rise as more information becomes available. Also today, OCHA and their humanitarian partners visit a number of sites for internally displaced people in the areas of Bulengu and Lushagala, which are the outskirts of Goma. They found that water and healthcare services are still operational, but conditions remain dire. In Goma itself, access to safe drinking water remains cut off, forcing people to use untreated water from Lake Kivu with all the risk that entails. Without urgent action, OCHA cautions that the risk of waterborne disease outbreaks will just continue to increase. For its part, the International Organization for Migration says today that several displacement sites, including on the outskirts of Goma, where over 300,000 people have been displaced, have been partially or completely emptied. The displaced men, women, and children urgently need shelter, they need food, they need clean water and medical assistance and various protection services. Essential items like blanket, mats, and cooking utensils are also in critical demand. Last night, Bruno Lemarquis, our humanitarian and resident coordinator for the DRC, issued a statement in which he said Goma is now facing the devastating consequences of the hostilities, with massive humanitarian needs and severely strained response capacities. As you recall, and as Jean-Pierre said, the airport remains closed as almost all of the roads except through Rwanda. He called on all parties to protect civilians and ensure access to goods and services that are essential for the survival of civilians. And on the human rights and another bleak picture, our colleagues at the Office for the High Commissioner for Human Rights say that since the start of the current crisis, they have documented summary executions by the M23 group in areas under the control of the armed group in South Kivu, such as Minova. M23 has occupied schools and hospitals. It has forced displaced people out of camps, as and subjected the civilian population to forced conscription and forced labor. Volker Turk, our High Commissioner, said he's particularly concerned that this latest escalation of violence could increase the risk of conflict-related sexual violence. As of today, the High Commissioner's office has documented cases of conflict-related sexual violence by the Congolese army and allied fighters, and they're verifying additional reports of rape also by Congolese troops. Just an update on the humanitarian situation in Gaza. The World Health Organization yesterday said they delivered dignity kits in the north of Gaza to support hygiene needs of more than 26,000 women and girls. There are plans also to expand the capacity at Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City by 200 beds. WHO is also working with the Ministry of Health to carry out an assessment at the Indonesian hospital to support the restoration of that facility. And 2 surgical teams are being deployed to the Ali Arab and public aid hospitals, both in Gaza City, to support trauma and surgical capacity there. WHO tells us that discussions are on their final stages of setting up prefabricated health facility in Gaza City. Meanwhile, our OCHA colleagues also tell us that 500,000 people have now returned to the northern area of the Gaza Strip and that the ceasefire continues to hold. Our partners say displaced Palestinians are also moving from north to south, although in smaller numbers. As of yesterday, 8,500 people have done that journey. We and our humanitarian partners are continuing to ramp up our response and monitoring points along the way of people moving south to north. This includes first aid and psychological support for the most vulnerable, including children, women, and older people. We and our partners are also expanding aid operations in North Gaza. Yesterday, OCHA team visited 2 sites in the South Ramal and Tel Al-Hewa neighborhoods in Gaza City. People there say they urgently need water, kitchen supplies, bedding, and cleaning items. Also, you heard from our colleague, the Mine Action Service, yesterday, and they're telling us today that UN mine action officers have accompanied some 300 convoys since the ceasefire took effect, and our World Food Program colleagues are also increasingly present in the north. OCHA remains deeply alarmed by the worsening humanitarian situation in northern area of the West Bank, as well as Israeli forces operations in Jenin continue for an 11th day. Repeated operations have resulted in widespread destruction of homes and infrastructure. Nearly all of Jenin's refugee camps, 20,000 residents, have been displaced over the past 2 months in the context of both security operations, both by the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli security forces. And on Haiti, another bleak picture. The Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that violent clashes this week between security forces and armed groups on the outskirts of the capital Port-au-Prince resulted in another wave of people trying to flee. Our colleagues at the International Organization for Migration say that more than 1,600 men, women, and children have now been displaced. 2/3 of them have taken refuge with host families, while more than 500 are now living in 3 newly established displacement sites. Our humanitarian partners tell us the situation for children in Haiti continues to be dire. The number of children internally displaced in the country has increased by nearly 50% since September, surging to more than 500,000 children. You'll recall that UNICEF says approximately 1 in 8 children in Haiti is now currently displaced. Some 3 million children need humanitarian assistance, including 1.2 million boys and girls in the capital Port-au-Prince. There's been a 70% increase in the recruitment of children by gangs over the past year, with up to 50% of gang members now estimated to be children in Haiti. That's what UNICEF is telling us. At the same time, the forced returns of Haitians continues to drive up humanitarian needs. Nearly 15,000 were returned from the Dominican Republic in the first 2 weeks of January alone, adding to the 200,000 people who were returned from across the region in all of last year. In addition, natural disasters also creating issues across Haiti. OCHA says since November of last year, nearly 330,000 people were impacted by floods across 6 of the Haiti's departments. The floods claimed dozens of lives and damaged nearly 50,000 homes. This year, we are appealing for $908 million to help 3.9 million people in Haiti. We urge the international community to scale up its support so that we and our humanitarian partners can support the people of Haiti who need it. Good week next week, World Interfaith Harmony Week. We need it. This annual event was established as a way to promote harmony between all people, regardless of their faith. We say, we have a new member of the honor roll. Somebody paid their dues in full, and we say gracias to them. Who are they? Spain, exactly. Right after Portugal. All right, Edie.
Thank you, Steph. On Haiti, the Secretary General has made clear that he supports the voluntary contributions to the trust fund. Mm-hmm. Can we get an update on whether there's been any significant increase and whether he might be changing his mind and supporting the U.S. call and others for UN peacekeeping?
At this point, there's no change in his position, but of course he will be guided by the wisdom of the Security Council. We believe there is a system in place. There's the multinational support mission in place. They're already there. They need support. They need money, and they need more materiel. We saw there were more police officers, I think, came in the last few weeks, and we'll get you an update on the numbers. Gabriel, and then.
Thank you, Steph. We just heard from Mr. Lacroix saying that in his assessment that the M23 and RDF are about 60 kilometers north of Bukavu. What precautions are the UN taking for your staff there, and any plans for evacuations of UN staff there?
We're moving some people out of there as a precaution. We're also trying to, we're trying to balance, as we always do in these conflict areas, how do we keep our staff safe and how do we keep delivering for the civilians that we're there to serve. So this is exactly what's going on right now.
Any idea how many staff there by any chance?
I can get you numbers as soon as I think of it.
Thank you.
Margaret, then Tony, then Frank.
Continuing on DRC, you said that the shelters on the outskirts of Goma have been emptied. I'm just wondering where the people have gone.
I think they've dispersed. We're not sure where they've gone, and that's, you're dealing with a population that's already at high risk, right? People in displaced persons camps, where at least we know where they are, we know how to help them. But once the population disperse in the midst of combat, it's much harder for us to get to them. So we don't know where they've all gone. They've sought safety in other places. Obviously, as the situation settles, we will try to find them, and hopefully people will come back to more centralized points where they can get humanitarian aid.
Do you know how many people were in the shelters? Because you said something, I was scribbling. So 300,000 IDPs, outskirts of Goma, the shelters are empty. So I'm not sure how many of the 300,000 were actually in shelters.
As always,
it's a huge number
if you don't pay attention to what I say, and I don't pay attention to what I say,
well, it's just a huge number of people.
It is
vanished,
a number.
so.
Yeah, it is a huge number. But it shows you the rapidity at which this happened, the violence that is going on. It's a desperate situation for these civilians who were often already displaced more than once. Bukavu, we have about 1,200 personnel, which includes people who are under kind of our security umbrella, which includes internationals, nationals, and dependents. Tony.
Shukran, Steph. My question is on Sudan, actually. Any comments on the reports of summary executions of civilians alleged by fighters and militia allied to the Sudanese armed forces in Khartoum North?
I think this is yet another example of the horrendous violence that civilians in Sudan have been subject to. From the armed forces, from the RSF, I think we've been very clear in our reporting. There will need to be accountability for all of the crimes that may have been committed in Sudan. Ephraim, then Frank, sorry, and then.
Yeah, just want to get back to something you were saying earlier at the beginning. You said that the briefing by the new president of the council on Monday would only be available in person. Does that mean
That's correct.
It will not go out on UN TV?
No, it'll go out. It will be one way. So you can sit at home in front of your screen, but they won't
Right.
hear you if you shout a question.
Okay, that's what it needs to know. Thank you.
Okay. Ephraim, then Abdelhamid.
Thanks again, Steph. Yesterday, the Secretary General met with 4 American doctors who just got back from Gaza. And I think their main message to him was stressing the emergency of medical evacuations for thousands of patients.
Yeah.
First, what was the SG's reaction to the stories that the doctors told him? And also, what is being done to make sure patients are being evacuated in the thousands?
From my conversation with the Secretary General this morning, he said he was very moved by the eyewitness reports and the first-hand account that he heard from the 4 American doctors. They are really a symbol of the sacrifice that people are making in order to help civilians. My understanding, and I think WHO said this publicly, there may be a first round of medical evacuations tomorrow through Rafah. And the Secretary General, I think, was vocal in his tweet that we will continue to push through our people on the ground for more medical evacuations.
Quick follow-up, please. And on the fears that some of the patients are expressing about their fears of leaving and not being allowed to return.
Well, that is clear that people will need, if they are evacuated for medical reasons, they have a right to come home. Abdelhamid, then Ibtisam.
Thank you. A follow-up to my friend's Afram's question. They also said, the doctors, that the SG promised to work hard to release Dr. Hussam Abu Safi. Can you share with us what?
I'm sure if he said he would, he will.
And the second question about UNRWA today. Are the offices today, this morning, open?
Yeah, today, I mean, I checked in with my colleagues today. As you know, a lot of the, today being Friday, a lot of the clinics and regular offices are closed, so they are closed, but there's no change in terms of the headquarters, as I mentioned yesterday, in East Jerusalem, and UNRWA's operations in Gaza and the West Bank are ongoing.
Thank you.
Ibtisam.
A follow-up on Gaza. As you know, there is a huge need for tents and caravans, and there is actually very little entering.
Yep.
Could you explain to us why? And do you have now numbers about how many tents or caravans you would approximately need?
I don't have the exact number, but I can tell you we're working through the machinery to ensure that enough tents, enough tarpaulins get through the pipeline and get through the different entry points into Gaza. Our colleagues who are on the ground are extremely well aware of the need for all these items, especially as people go back to what's left of their homes and understandably want to put up a tent, even in the rubble. So we are working with them, and we're working with, obviously, with all concerned to try to get as much material in as quickly as possible.
And on Rafah, there's supposed to be, I'm not sure if it's a total opening on Saturday or partially opening, at least for people to leave. Do you have any updates on that?
I mean,
what's the role of the UN?
The only update that I have is that my understanding is that Rafah may, there may be some medical evacuations tomorrow. Obviously, Rafah is a critical gateway for people and goods. We do not, as far as I know, have a role in the monitoring of entries and exits. All right. Oh, sorry. Yes, Alex, please go ahead.
Yep. Thank you so much, Steph. There are some reports that North Korean soldiers were withdrawn from the front line in Kursk region. Can you verify
No,
that?
I mean, we've seen press reports on soldiers in the DPRK. We are not actively monitoring the front lines.
Can you have one more?
Of course.
Moscow has accused Ukraine of killing 22 civilians in Kursk region. First of all, how could you comment on that? And secondly, I know there were some efforts by the UN to have access to the Kursk region. Any updates on that?
No update on access. I mean, I think we have spoken out very consistently against the death and killing of civilians, on whether they be in the Russian Federation or in Ukraine. Thank you. See you Monday.